Of Arirang News, I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. South Korea is sending a team of envoys to North Korea aimed at encouraging talks between Washington and Pyongyang. It's the most high-profile visit by senior South Korean officials in over 10 years. US President Donald Trump's steel tariff plan sparks a fierce backlash from economic powerhouses like China, the EU and Canada, but his trade team insists there will be no exemptions. Plus, Xi Jinping is the focus as China's annual parliament gathers in Beijing. They are set to abolish presidential term limits, potentially giving the Chinese leader a pass to rule the country for decades. Our top story this morning, though, South Korea's presidential office has revealed the names of President Moon Jae-in's special envoys who will travel to North Korea for a two-day visit. They are going to leave at 2 p.m. Korea time, around 4 hours from now. Our chief Blue House correspondent Moon Gon-young starts us off.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in is sending his top national security advisor and chief intelligence officer as special envoys to Pyongyang on Monday in a bid to persuade North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to come to the dialogue table with Washington. It's only the latest chapter in an Olympics-driven détente between the two Koreas and part of Mr. Moon's efforts to carry the momentum forward to resolve the nuclear standoff on the Korean peninsula.
The special delegation will take a direct chartered flight to Pyongyang Monday afternoon for a two-day visit, during which they'll hold talks with high-level North Korean officials to discuss ways to establish peace on the Korean peninsula and develop relations between the two Koreas.
The Blue House says the nature of the South Special Delegation is to reciprocate the North Korean leader's decision to send a senior Olympics delegation, including his sister Kim Ya-jung, who delivered Kim's invitation for an inter-Korean summit.
Seoul's special delegation will comprehensively discuss various issues, especially on ways to set the right conditions for U.S.-North Korea talks aimed at denuclearization and improve inter-Korean relations.
A reasonable assumption at this point is that Seoul's special envoy will also carry a written message from South Korean President Moon to the North Kim, and the extensive discussions will include the possibility of a cross-border summit between the two leaders. The 10-member group traveling to Pyongyang comprises key officials in the South Korean government in charge of North Korean affairs. Among them, Vice Unification Minister Chun Hae-sung, who's been at the forefront of the latest inter-Korean contact since January this year. The chief of the National Intelligence Service, Seo Hoon, has been involved in the coordination of the two previous inter-Korean summits in 2000 and 2007, and the NSC chief Chung Eui-yong, who will be leading as Mr. Moon's special envoy, oversees inter-Korean relations, diplomacy, and national defense, acting as a primary contact between the Moon government and the Trump administration. A senior Blue House official says one of the special envoy's key missions will be finding out the North Korean leader's views on various issues and accurately relaying that message to the South Korean president. After the two-day visit to North Korea, the special envoys will travel to the United States to brief officials on their discussions in Pyongyang. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News, The Blue House.
Now, US President Donald Trump, during a joke-filled monologue with reporters in Washington, said that North Korea had recently reached out about possible talks. Trump said, quote unquote, that they called up a couple of days ago and said we would like to talk. And I said, so would we, but you have to denuke. And Trump added, let's see what happens. Though it's unclear whether President Trump was joking or if formal US-North Korea talks are imminent, his administration has said it would be willing to meet with North Korea if Pyongyang agrees to start the process of abandoning its nuclear weapons program as part of any talks. White House officials did not respond to a request for clarification, and the remarks were made during a series of jokes poking fun at himself, his administration and others at the annual dinner. Now, President Trump's announcement last Thursday that the United States would impose hefty tariffs on imported steel and aluminium to protect American producers has stoked fears of a global trade war. Trump appears unbowed by broad international and domestic criticism, with his team saying he has no plans to exempt any countries from the tariff duties. Our Park So-yeon with the details.
President Trump's announcement of sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum imports has sparked fears of a global trade war and triggered turmoil across the American economy. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said on Sunday that Trump is not planning on exempting any countries from the tariff duties. Ross told ABC News that President Trump has had conversations with a number of world leaders when asked if the president would consider exempting allies such as South Korea, Canada, and Mexico.
I know that a lot of ministers from a lot of countries have been talking with the president. They've been talking with me. They've been talking with others. We'll see. The president makes the decisions.
White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro said no countries will be excluded from the tariffs, saying there is a difference between exemptions and country exclusions. He said there will be an exemption procedure for particular cases, but there will be no country exclusions at this point in time. President Trump announced last Thursday that the U.S. would slap tariffs of 25% on steel imports and 10% on aluminum, respectively. Senator Lindsey Graham and a growing number of Republicans and business groups have criticized Trump's tariff plans. The Federation of Korean Industries is also urging 565 U.S. lawmakers and officials to press the Trump administration to reconsider its new policies. The tariffs are expected to hit South Korea hard, sharply raising prices of South Korean exports and hurting their price competitiveness against American manufacturers. Park So-yeon, Arirang News.
So, as we heard there, a global trade war could be about to heat up after the Trump administration announced its plans to slap hefty tariffs on steel and aluminium imports from countries including key allies like South Korea. Now, despite a wave of criticism from around the world and within the United States, and with many countries considering similar measures on American products, President Trump appears to be standing firm on his decision. Lee Jung-yeon with more.
The off-the-cuff announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump that he would impose heavy tariffs on all steel imports has already set off a ripple of responses from world leaders. The EU, Canada, and China have said that if these tariffs are finalized, they will take reciprocal measures to impose taxes on American products. There is evident tension between the U.S. and China, which is concerning for South Korea as it relies economically on both countries. Beijing said it's ready to impose tariffs on American agricultural products, an apparent move targeting American farmers, who are an important support base for President Trump. As the second biggest market in the world, China has been the main target of the Trump administration's trade policies. Meanwhile, the EU has said it would start looking to impose tariffs on American products like Harley-Davidson motorcycles, bourbon whiskey, and Levi's jeans. Canada, the #1 steel exporter to the U.S., has also said it's ready to take reciprocal action or tariffs to be imposed on its steel and aluminum products. Responding to the fallout, the Washington Post has urged the Trump administration to make exceptions for certain U.S. allies. Its editorial board said Friday that there's no national security risk posed by importing steel and aluminum from treaty allies like Canada, Japan, South Korea, and Germany, and that alienating these countries diplomatically would hurt U.S. interests. The editors noted that Trump's announcement last Thursday isn't final yet, so there could still be changes, and the original proposal does allow for exceptions based on America's economic and security interests. The Post editor said the stability of the international system depends on the plan being changed. Lee Jung-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, China's parliament, the National People's Congress, opens its annual session in Beijing later today with a proposed constitutional amendment dominating the agenda. The amendment would lift the two-term limit for the president, allowing Xi Jinping to stay on for years, possibly decades to come. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
With the National People's Congress set to open, an amendment to the Constitution would allow President Xi Jinping to extend his rule beyond 2 terms and possibly for life, as the Communist Party of China's Central Committee has proposed removing the 2-term limit for the post of president and vice president. Despite concerns both at home and abroad, the National People's Congress spokesman Zhang Ye-shui argued that while there are no limits for head of the party and the military, the president has such limits, as Xi, who took office in 2012, heads the party, the military, and the presidency. Zhang added that the move is conducive to uphold the authority of the Central Committee with Xi Jinping at the core. Zhang also stated that Beijing wants to avoid a trade war with the U.S., presenting China as a defender of the global trading system. Stressing that there are more common interests between the two nations, the spokesperson said cooperation is the only option for both countries. In addition, one of the highlights of the opening of the National People's Congress will be the return of Wang Qishan, who's set to take the post of vice president. The 69-year-old was at the forefront of Xi Jinping's campaign against corruption before stepping down as a Politburo Standing Committee member last autumn. With around 3,000 delegates set to be present at the annual meeting of China's largely rubber-stamped parliament, pundits are looking to see how this session, which will last around 2 weeks, will affect China and the rest of the world. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has been pushing his new Southern policy, a plan that aims to strengthen Seoul's relations with Southeast Asia to the same level as that with the four major powers around the Korean Peninsula, emphasizing cooperation on people, prosperity and peace. Today, we are going to take a look at how this policy is being received by one of the countries in the region, that is Indonesia. Cha Sang-mi reports from Jakarta.
In November of last year, President Moon Jae-in made a state visit to Jakarta, Indonesia. Following a successful bilateral summit with his Indonesian counterpart Joko Widodo, President Moon vowed to upgrade Seoul's economic and diplomatic ties with Southeast Asian nations as he unveiled his administration's new diplomatic direction dubbed the New Southern Policy.
Since President Moon's visit, bilateral relations have been upgraded to a special strategic partnership. This turns our relationship from the level of far cousin to that of brother.
The people here tell me that there is a saying in Indonesia called gotong royong, which means working together to achieve a common goal. And in line with that phrase, the Indonesian government and experts are fostering far-reaching cooperation with countries beyond ASEAN in diverse fields. The impact of the New Southern Policy from the Indonesian side is perfectly reciprocal, according to a local political scientist.
We will have a better, I must say, bargaining position to other big partners. That means to diversify our partnership to other countries. Compared to China or Japan, Korea is the foreign partner that has less or more clean historical background.
As for the economic benefits, a former Indonesian envoy to South Korea says that with its population of over 260 million, Indonesia can serve as a massive economic market for South Korean businesses. But he pointed out a few things that should be done by the Indonesian government.
If we are talking about garment and textile, it is 90% dominated by Korean companies. But we have a problem in this garment industries and textiles because of the minimum wage. Minimum wage increased from year to year.
The former diplomat says companies are already considering alternative options for business destinations, fearing a sharp on-year increase in Indonesia's wages. He also expressed hope for further trade agreements involving the country, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as such deals would help Seoul and Jakarta broaden their trade reach. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News, Jakarta.
Now, let's take a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we're going to start in Syria. Residents in eastern Ghouta are reported to be fleeing as pro-government forces continue to bombard that rebel-held area. For more on this and other international news, let's turn, as we always do, to our Aram. So, Aram, the situation there is now being described as beyond critical. Any proposal to stop the hostilities seems to be having absolutely zero effect.
That's right, Mark. Last week, Syria's ally Russia proposed a 5-hour stop to shelling every day to allow civilians to leave and aid to come in. That, along with a UN-backed ceasefire, all came to nothing as pro-regime forces continued their airstrikes and artillery fire. Residents were supposed to leave through so-called humanitarian corridors, but they were reported to have been targeted, leaving dozens of civilian casualties. Now it has come to a point where they are just taking shelter underground or just running for their lives. The violence seems to be far from over, as Syrian President Bashar al-Assad vowed Sunday to continue his army's offensive against eastern Ghouta. Syrian troops and their allies have now taken about a quarter of the rebel-held enclave, seizing several towns and villages in recent days. Assad insists that he is eliminating whom he has described as terrorists, but other nations accuse him of targeting civilians and trying to reclaim lost territory. US President Donald Trump and British Prime Minister Theresa May agreed in a phone call Sunday that Russia and Syria are responsible for what they called heartbreaking human suffering. French President Emmanuel Macron also urged his Iranian counterpart to use his country's ties with Damascus to pressure the regime to implement the UN truce. After braving long lines, Italians cast their votes Sunday in one of the country's most uncertain election in years. Polls have now closed, and exit polls suggest a centre-right coalition led by former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi gaining the most seats in Parliament, but still far short of a majority. The anti-establishment Five-Star Movement looks to be second and will likely be the largest single party. However, as of yet, no party is expected to gain a majority to form a government and could spark political chaos in the coming days. They may have to seek alliances, but the position of Prime Minister is expected to be hotly contested. Exit polls have been inaccurate in the past, and a new electoral system has only added to the unpredictability of this year's elections. Campaigns have been dominated by immigration and the economy, with far-right parties pushing anti-EU sentiment. Hollywood's biggest stars have taken to the red carpet for the 90th Academy Awards. This year's Oscars is expected to be dominated by politics, the Me Too and Time's Up movements, as well as heated competition for Best Picture. This year's Oscar is being hosted by talk show host Jimmy Kimmel for the second straight year. Movies tipped for Best Picture include The Shape of Water, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Get Out, and Christopher Nolan's war epic Dunkirk.
Najeon is one of the most representative forms of Korean traditional crafts, known for its exquisite patterns and illuminating beauty. This 1,000-year-old traditional heritage is finding itself a part of modern culture. Let's see how this movement began. This is Korea's first Najeon Crafts Museum, opened in Seoul in 2014. With furniture, everyday items, and ornaments, it displays some 300 modern and contemporary pieces of Najeon art created during the Joseon dynasty and after the Japanese occupation.
The museum owns an area of mother-of-pearl pieces that display the cutting technique dating back to the late Joseon dynasty. Also, it has pieces that were created during the Japanese colonial period, which are lesser known to the public. I believe that that's what distinguishes our collection.
Najeon literally means mother of pearl in Korean, and the term refers to a traditional inlaying technique using mother of pearl, the iridescent layer that forms the inside of the shells of mollusks. The museum offers a myriad of Najeon pieces, including those with the 10 traditional symbols of longevity, landscape paintings, dragons, and plum flowers, causing audiences to stand in awe of our cultural legacy. The highlight of the exhibition, however, is Pebbles. It's a collection of stone-shaped sculptures with lacquered surfaces inlaid with mother of pearl. They shine like bright jewelry.
The thin slices of mother of pearl are pasted onto the curved surfaces of the pebbles, creating an exquisite beauty.
This piece stays true to traditional techniques and materials, yet displays a striking influence from contemporary sculpture. Created by Najeon artisan Hwang Sam-yong, it's his modern take on authentic Korean heritage. This is Hwang's studio in Namyangju, Gyeonggi-do Province, where he creates all of his masterpieces. The artisan cuts mother-of-pearl into thin slices, as thin as thread, and then affixes them to the work surface. It's an ancient technique that has long been used to create geometric patterns, text, and depth.
The cutting technique refers to cutting mother-of-pearl into desired patterns and then filling the blanks. Also, we have to know exactly what subject will be created in the filling process, like clouds in the sky, waterfalls, or waterways.
The 0.4 millimeter thick strips of mother-of-pearl covered a curved pebble. He then adhered the mother-of-pearl to the surface before finally varnishing it with lacquer. The whole process is labor-intensive and time-consuming, as it takes him some 300 hours to just create a small piece. What's more, it can take over a year for a larger project. Pebbles broke the conventional boundaries of Korean traditional Najeon crafts. How did the artist come up with the piece?
I combined tradition with modernity for pebbles. In the past, I focused more on traditional wardrobes, stationary chests, dressing tables, jewel boxes, and so on, but I wanted to create a piece of art with a modern twist.
Hwang's artistry is well appreciated overseas as well. He has created a total of 24 mother-of-pearl pieces to date, and 17 of them have been sold to galleries and collectors in the UK, Switzerland, France, and the US.
Mother-of-pearl displays its natural color with no artificial process whatsoever. However, it still presents illuminating and iridescent beauty. I believe that's what mesmerizes foreign audiences.
Hwang dedicated his whole life to Najeon crafts. Sadly, traditional crafts are losing popularity in the present era, with only a few people remaining in the field. That's why he tries to pass down his skills to as many people as possible.
Hwang loves teaching his skills, especially to young people. He never holds back his knowledge.
My dream is to create miniatures of Korea's national treasures like Tabotap and Seokgatap pagodas, Hwanghamun and Sungyemun gates. I like to feel the spirit of our ancestors who created beautiful treasures by hand.
Hwang is trying his utmost for the world to treasure the beauty and excellence of both Najeon crafts and Korean traditional culture. His heartfelt efforts bequeath this wonderful craft art to the world and future generations. Taking the old to make something new, tradition combined with modernity, Najeon crafts have entered a historic new phase with contemporary elements. They're providing direction for the Korean arts and culture industry to help preserve and develop its heritage.
Good morning. Most parts of the country received heavy spring showers overnight, while rain is tapering off, but more showers are on the way through this afternoon with 5 to 20 millimeters of rain expected, while mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province will see snowfall. And temperature-wise, it's going to be a couple notches lower than yesterday for the upper regions, while southern provinces and Jeju Island will notice cooler temperatures today. And especially those of you on Jeju will notice much cooler temperatures this afternoon, only getting up to 12 degrees, while Seoul gets up to 9 degrees. And expect to see some sunshine coming out later in the day. Now this week, we'll actually notice temperatures going down as the week goes on, so dress accordingly. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While the nation saw some much-needed heavy spring rain overnight, most parts in North Korea will be under mostly sunny skies along with cooler highs than the south. And as for the rest of Asia, Tokyo will see cloudy skies turning to rain in the afternoon, so have an umbrella handy. Meanwhile, Perth is set to swelter under 35-degree heat on Monday and an even hotter Tuesday under sunny skies, so watch out for heat stroke. And heading to North America, the first weekend of March brought pleasant weather conditions to Chicago, but you'll need an umbrella for the start of the work week. And as for South America, many major cities on the map will have unstable weather conditions on Monday. Taking you to Europe, in the UK, Monday will be the first day back at work for many after snow caused 4 days of chaos and closures of roads and the coldest start to spring in 5 years. And lastly, to Africa, Addis Ababa will have unstable weather conditions. And that's all the weather update for now.
And that's where we're going to leave this newscast for now as well. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.